Hello, today I'm here to teach you some more things you should know about using a Singer machine here in the Fashion Studio Lab. So last time I taught you how to do a basic seam, but I didn't teach you how to secure that seam. So basically anytime you create something that you plan on wearing, you're going to want to use the backstitch lever, and what that is going to do is it is going to give you a backstitch, and a backstitch is how you secure a stitch. So what you're going to want to do is set it up like you're ready to sew a regular seam, and then once you are ready to go, you're going to go super slow in the beginning, so make sure you put very little pressure or very light pressure on the presser foot when you start going. And then a few stitches in, you're going to want to push down on the backstitch lever, and you're going to want to backstitch. Basically, that just means going backwards on a stitch. So you're going to get about ½ inch into the fabric, and then you're going to backstitch back, because what you want to do is get as close as possible to the end and backstitch. And when you do this backstitch, you're not going to want to do more than about 4 or 5 stitches backwards. So do 4 or 5 stitches forward, 4 or 5 stitches back. Make sure not to go too back where you go off the fabric. But once you basically get to the beginning of the fabric again, you're going to run it like a regular seam. And then when you get to the end of your fabric, get as close to the end as you possibly can. You might even want to hand crank in some cases. And then you're going to press the back stitch lever again and go back, like I said, only about 4 or 5 stitches to secure the stitch backwards. And you're going to want to hold it like this. I'm just holding it more outward for purposes of showing you what I'm doing. So only a few stitches backward, and then run it back out like you would end a normal seam. So once again, with close-ups, I will tell you. So you're gonna go forward like you would a normal stitch, but stop once you get 4 or 5 stitches in, do a back stitch to secure the beginning of the stitch, go down like a normal stitch, and then get to almost the end, as close to the end as possible of your fabric, and then secure it with another back stitch, back, like I said, a good ½ inch, so 4 or 5 stitches backward, and then back out like a normal stitch. And that is how you backstitch to secure a stitch. Another thing you might run into a lot is because you are making a specific part of a garment, you might want to secure how your fabric is folded or how it lines up with pins. The only issue is you have to be very careful when sewing with pins, because if your needle on the machine hits a pin, it will more than likely break. So make sure when you are sewing with pins, you are doing it very slow so you don't get the needle to touch the pin. So go very lightly with your seams when you're stitching pins. And I would say when the pin basically touches or is at the edge of the foot, you're going to want to pull it out and put it aside so that the needle does not come in contact with any of your pins. So once again, go slowly, and once your pin makes contact with the edge of the foot, pull it out. And your fabric will still hold because the presser or the foot of the machine is still pressing down on your fabric. So yeah, just be careful that your pins do not make contact with the needle of the machine. So what happens if the needle breaks? Let's say you were either sewing with pins and you were just being a little careless, or maybe you were using the wrong fabric and your needle breaks. What should you do? Well, I will teach you how to properly replace the needle on the machine. So basically, this screw right here, I'll give you a closer look. This screw right here holds this needle in place. So you can see basically this screw holds this needle in place. So we're going to take this screwdriver, specifically made for this small of a screw, and we are going to unscrew it. Now when you unscrew it, I recommend holding the needle between your pointer and your thumb, because the needle could absolutely fall into this hole right here, and that would be very bad for the machine. And it does not take much of strength to get the needle out. So all you're gonna do is, lefty loosey, righty tighty, and your needle should come out very easily. So now we're going to check the type of needle to make sure we get a replacement that works with this machine. So this needle says that it is an 18. So it's a Schmetz 18. So the brand and the number will usually be right here on the side. Once again, my camera, I apologize for you not being able to see, but just know that on the edge of the needle, you will see a brand name and a number. So just make sure to pay attention to these so that you can find a proper replacement needle. Okay, so we have another Schmetz 18 here, and make sure to double check that the needle you have matches up with the needle that you need to replace it with. Singers usually take Schmetzes, and Jukies will usually take organ needles. So just remember to check those, and make sure to check the numbers, because the numbers of the needles are probably more important than the brands even. Because you might have the right brand, but you don't have the right number, and then you'll wonder, why is it not fitting in the machine? Because it wasn't made for that kind of machine. For example, the overlocks in this room, the overlock machines, they take organ size 14, and if you try to put any other type of needle in there, it will not work. So just remember which needles and numbers go with what. So now to actually replace the needle, you'll see that the needle has a dipped side. So one side is curved in and dipped, and the other side is fully cylindrical. So what you're going to do is, with the fully cylindrical side, you're going to make sure that faces outwards. So this is outwards. And then the dipped side, the side with the little curve in it, is going to face towards the machine. So this way. And make sure it is perfectly parallel to the machine. So we're going to take our needle, we're going to hold it in place, make sure it's aligned right where we want it. Perfect. And now all we have to do is just not even too much of there we have it. Now you successfully replaced the needle on a machine. The last thing we want to remind you all of is what the machine should look like when you are leaving for the day. So first things first is making sure your machine is off when you leave. So when it's on, you'll most likely hear noise, except on the silent machines. And most of the silent machines are Jukis, in which case you'll see a light. And if the light is on in the power switch, that means that the machine is on. So make sure you switch it off. So once again, if there's a light in the power switch, that means it is on and you want to switch it off before you leave. In this case, the machine will make noise and the on button will be stuck in there. So make sure you press the off. And that goes for basically whenever you get up and you leave the machine unattended. For safety purposes, just make sure to turn it off once you leave. Pretty simple so far, and it only gets more simple from here. So you might see that your machine or the needle on the machine is resting on a piece of fabric like this. That's to preserve the needle and make sure it doesn't get too much exposure to air, because it is a metal and it can oxidize. So we want to keep these needles around for as long as possible. And basically, we're going to take our foot, place the piece of fabric underneath, and hand crank the needle so that it's resting in the fabric. And lastly, you're just going to take those little brown covers that you see on practically all the machines, and you're going to cover up the machine so that it doesn't get as much exposure to air and dust, because that can seriously affect the machine if unattended. So that's all. Just make sure to keep it off, keep your needle inside fabric, and to cover your sewing machines. And that's about it.